Hi, and welcome to the Future of Work. This is a live stream that we have every week where we talk about how forward-thinking organizations really take advantage of the products and the services that Giant offers to become a high-performing organization. I'm Bronson Taylor, the CEO of Giant. As you've probably noticed, I am missing my co-host today. Usually I have Mike Opedal, our president, with us also. He's actually on vacation this week. He's enjoying the mountains in North Carolina. So if you're tuning into this, Mike, first, you shouldn't. You should be on vacation. And second, hi. So anyway, today we are going to talk about the power of data. You probably noticed there's a trend in organizations to be data-driven, and if not data-driven, at least data-informed. We're moving away from the era of gut feelings of I think this is right, it might be right. We have so much data now with the emergence of big data. We have so much information in this information age that we don't have to just make gut decisions anymore. We don't have to rely on what seems right. In this modern era that we're in, we have the ability to actually make decisions based on data. Now, it doesn't mean they're always going to be right. Just because you're data-driven or data-informed, it doesn't mean your decisions are foolproof, right? But there's a better chance that if we lead our organizations with data in mind, that we're going to make more correct decisions, right? So one of the things we do at Giant, first, we believe in being data informed and really basing our opinions on data. There's a great quote that I like to share, which is, if we're going to go with data, let's go with data. If we're going to go with opinions, let's go with mine. And that's really the dilemma we find ourselves in, right? Is everyone wants to go with their own opinion. And the only truth, the only way to get by that is to say, you know what, let's move beyond opinions and let's actually look at the data relevant to the decision we're trying to make. So at Giant, we believe in using the data that we have internally for ourselves. We also believe in building our products in such a way that the data allows you all to be leaders who use data, that we give you access to information and insights that you wouldn't otherwise have. There's no other piece of software where you could get that information if you don't use Giant. That's really one of the things we try to build into our products. So today, I'm going to talk about the power of data, but specifically how you can use one piece of data that we give you in one of our products called Invincible. So let me share my screen here. We're going to talk about the power of data. And like I said, specifically within Invincible. So let me start with this question. What is the health of your organization? I just want you to think about that for a moment. What is the health of your organization? If you have a piece of paper or pen, write it down. What would you say to that question? Is it healthy? Is it not healthy? Could you put a number to it? What would the number be based on? What would you measure to know the health of your organization? Is your organization healthy? Is health just about revenue? Is health about happiness? What is the health of your organization? So you're probably already realizing that's a really hard question to answer. There's so many ways you could come at it. There's so many possible answers. That's a tough question. So now here's the truth though. It's kind of a trick question, right? Because one of the things that we've discovered at Giant with years and years of working with Fortune 500 companies, working with best-in-class brands, working with governments, we've learned that really the question we're supposed to ask is, what is the health of your teams? And I'll tell you why that is. An organization is too big. I mean, even if the organization is only 50 people, it's too big to say the organization is healthy or not healthy. The reality is there's lots of subcultures within your organization, and those subcultures, those teams, are something that's small enough and manageable enough that you actually can get the health of a team, but you can't really say the organization as a whole is healthy or not healthy. But what you can do is you can ascertain the health of individual teams, and then you can have a composite score for the health of the organization. So really the question is, how healthy are your teams? But now again, you find yourself in that same dilemma. How do you measure the health of a team? What is it based on? What criteria do you use? Still, even though we know that now it's about teams and the collection of teams is what makes up an organization, it doesn't mean that it's easy to answer the question, what is the health of your teams? And yet, even though it's hard to answer that question, the answer to it will decide the fate of your company. If your teams are unhealthy, your organization is unhealthy. And if your organization is unhealthy, it's not going to stand the test of time. So knowing the answer to this is vital. What is the health of your teams? If your teams are healthy, you will take market share, you will grow, and you will innovate. You'll hire good people. They'll be attracted to you. You can have a great culture. If your teams are unhealthy, you're not going to grow. Eventually, you may be riding on, the coattails of yesterday's innovations, but there's not going to be innovations for tomorrow. You're not going to attract the best people. Your culture is going to be weak. So how you answer this is vital to the lifeblood of the organization. And yet we don't know how to answer it. What is the health of your teams? I want you to think about specific teams in your organization. Picture it in your mind and think, is it healthy? Is it not? What teams are most healthy? And here's really the dilemma. When I ask how healthy are your teams, one, it's hard to know what to measure. And two, it's hard to know how to measure it. So when I say it's hard to know what to measure, there's so many different possible things you could measure to try to discern the health of a team. You could say, well, let's make it about how much revenue they're bringing in the door. Well, not all teams are based on revenue. Some teams are based on supporting the revenue that's already there. So you can't just use EBITDA or revenue or something like that as the metric to say, oh, that's a healthy team because they're on the offense and they help us grow. Some of your teams are on the defense and they help you not lose money. So again, you can't use revenue as an indicator. Could you use, do they hit their goals? Well, that kind of is a good thing to look at, but maybe there's a team that has so much talent, they're actually underperforming and still hitting their goals. We see this all the time. You could have a couple high performers on a team and they'll hit the goal, but they're actually capable of so much more. And so using revenue or hitting goals, it doesn't really get at the heart of what we should measure to know if a team is healthy. So in a minute, I want to talk about what we measure and why it's the right stuff to measure. But then even once you know what to measure, it's really hard to know how to measure it. Even if you know what you're supposed to try to get at within that team dynamic, how do you actually get that information? How do you get it in a human readable form that you can make decisions based off of? Those are two really big questions. What do you measure and how do you measure it? So again, just to recap, what's the health of the organization? It's not really the right question. The right question is, what is the health of your teams? Because an organization is a collection of teams. Okay, great. So now we know we should try to figure out the health of a team. Well, one, what do we measure at the team level? And two, how do we measure it, right? So that's where we are. So let's talk about what to measure. So here's something really interesting that has happened to us over the last couple of years. We have used our own diagnostic tool to measure the health of organizations. We've used our own diagnostic tool to figure out what to measure. And we've, discovered this over the course of 7+ years. But we came to Google and they actually became one of our clients last year, and we're in talks with them to even do more for them this year. And one of the reasons they decided to go with Giant as one of their vendors, one of their providers with the products that we offer, is because our diagnostic tools align with their Aristotle research. Google had a multi-year massive research project where they really just wanted to try to find out one thing. And that one thing was, what makes a team high performing, right? Is it having an A player? Is it having a good culture? Is it having, fill in the blank? What is it? And so they spent a lot of time and a lot of money, and they had a lot of really smart people trying to answer that question, because they had the same insight. They knew if they could improve the quality of their teams, they would improve the quality of the organization. And Google's such a large organization, you can't change it as a whole, but you can change the subcultures like we talked about. So when they saw what we measure at the team level, they were really impressed because it aligns with their Aristotle research. Here's the basics of their Aristotle research. And if you do a Google search for Google Aristotle or Google Rework, you'll see that logo at the bottom of the screen there. You'll be able to find their multi-page findings, but this is kind of the graphic that sums up what they discovered. So they discovered that high-performing teams have these 5 things in common, which actually goes against a lot of what was common sense before this study. So first, they have data to show that high-performing teams have psychological safety. And what they mean by that is that team members feel safe to take risk and be vulnerable in front of each other. So they put that as number 1. A lot of people would say, well, a high-performing team has a lot of A players with domain expertise that are very driven. And they would say that's what makes a high-performing team. And Google said, well, it's fine to have that opinion, but the data shows that psychological safety is actually the number 1 thing that will help a team become high-performing. Number 2, they said dependability. And what they mean by that is team members get things done on time and meet Google's high bar for excellence. So again, a lot of people probably wouldn't put dependability on that list of what makes a high-performing team, but there it is at number 2. Number 3 for Google was structure and clarity. Team members have clear roles, plans, and goals. Number 4, they put meaning. Work is personally important to team members. And number 5, they put impact. Team members think their work matters and creates change. Just think for a second about 1, 4, and 5, okay? 1, 4, and 5 are very soft. They're very squishy. They're not the hard edge things we would expect to make a high performing team. Psychological safety is about communication and relationships. Number 4, meaning. Who would have thought that having meaning that is personally important actually makes a team high performing? We just thought, a lot of people think, well, if you pay somebody enough, meaning is irrelevant. Or if you pay someone enough, the impact of their work on the organization as a whole is not that important. And actually Google found, what? That's not true. Number 4 and 5 matter. Number 1 matter, right? So these are the 5 things in the Aristotle Research Initiative that they uncovered that makes a high performing team. And when they looked at what we measure inside of Invincible, what our assessment actually gets at, it gets at these 5 things. We don't label them the exact same way. Ours are organized slightly differently. But at the end of the day, we get at psychological safety and dependability and structure and clarity and meaning and impact, the things that actually are worth measuring at the team level, so that when we improve one of them, we're actually improving the team performance. See, that's the important thing. If you're not measuring the right things, then when you improve them, it's irrelevant. If you are improving number 97 on the list of things that matter to a team, then even if you improve it by 100%, the team probably hasn't improved at all. And that means the organization has improved even less overall. So it's important that we improve the things that matter most. So if I were to get with a team right now, I would say, how can we make sure their psychological safety? If that's number 1, that's number 1. And focusing on that will bring us the largest return on investment for our time and energy and resources. So this is what Google discovered. But then that second question that I asked, that's what to measure, but how do you measure it, right? So like I said, over more than 7 years, we've developed a 70-question assessment that can accurately depict the health of your teams. We know what to ask a team to actually discover if they have those 5 things from Aristotle, and more specifically, if they have the way we organize those 5 things. And so we have an assessment, 70 questions long. Everyone on the team takes it inside of this product, Invincible. Everyone on the team takes it, and we're actually able to measure how every single team is doing at a granular level. Let me actually show you an example of a couple questions of this assessment. So this is our Invincible team assessment. So when you bring your teams onto our Invincible product, every team is going to take this assessment, and we actually recommend they take it on a quarterly basis so you can see how their scores trend over time, and you can see how their performance trends over time. So this is the first couple questions. First, it asks you, what team are you taking this assessment for? Because in the modern organization, an individual could be on multiple teams. And so we have to ask, well, what team are you taking this for? Because you might answer very differently if you're taking this as a member of the marketing team, as opposed to if you're taking this as a member of the sales team. You may be on both teams, but you may have wildly different answers depending on what team you have in mind, because one team might have that psychological safety and the other team might not have it. And so your scores for the two could be all over the place, even though you're in both teams. So at first ask you, what team are you taking this for? And I'm just going to show you the first two questions right here on the screen. Number one, our team has a process for developing others. Strongly agree, disagree, undecided, agree, strongly agree. I want you to picture right now a team that you're a part of, whether it's an executive team, whether it's a marketing team, product team, customer support team, fill in the blank. I want you to picture a team that you are on right now. Think about the people, think about the meetings, think about the processes, really think about that team. Answer the question in your own mind. Our team has a process for developing others. Do you feel like that team has a process for developing others? This is just one of the 70 questions. And already you can see that a lot of people can't write strongly agree. I mean, some people are undecided. They don't even, maybe there's a process, but it's not really written down and it's not really followed. Maybe they disagree and they're like, you know what, there's not a process because I don't feel like people are developing me. I don't feel like I'm developing. I don't feel like there's a clear path for me to develop my skill set and to have those things. And so you can already see just this one question, it really gets at the heart of something deep. Look at the second question. Our team is able to continue to execute when team members are absent, even if unexpectedly. Again, picture your team right now. If someone has to be out of the organization for, let's say, 2 months, unexpected, there was no plan for them being gone, how would your execution be affected as a team? And imagine it's someone that's critical to the team. Don't imagine it's the new person that doesn't have a lot of responsibility. Imagine that it's you, or imagine it's someone really critical to the team that it's hard to imagine doing life without. Do you think you will continue to execute when that person is absent for a few months? Do you strongly disagree all the way to strongly agree? And here's what this does. This uncovers really deep truths about a team by answering really simple questions. When everyone in your team answers these 70 questions, you are going to have insights about every team in your organization that I would say you can't have otherwise, right? Remember we talked about at the beginning, data. We're in the era of big data. We don't have to go with intuition. Your intuition might be that the marketing team is the best team, but what if the scores say otherwise? What would you do? What if you think that the sales team is low performing and then they actually take the assessment and you realize they're a really healthy team that may do things differently than you would? You may not like some of the people on that team, but maybe their scores are high. Maybe that's what the data says, right? When we're forced to actually look at the data, it's going to take us as leaders to a whole new level because we really have to do some soul searching on, do we want to believe our opinions even if the data say otherwise? So here's what happens. If your teams take this assessment, then you're going to have a graph like this for every single team. Now, you know how I talked about in the Aristotle Google research, they had their 5. Here's how we organize those same ideas. We organize them around communication, relationships, alignment, execution, and capacity. Communication, relationships, alignment, execution, and capacity. And so those 70 questions that are on that Invincible assessment that I just showed you, every single one of those questions is about one of these 5. We mix them up, so it's not like all the communication questions are at the beginning and then all the relationship questions, but we mix them up so you don't know what you're actually affecting the score of when you answer. But when it's done, every team gets this kind of graph. And this graph changes over time depending on areas they excel in or have growth opportunities in. This is the actual graph from Giant, from our internal team right here. So you can see our scores. We do really well at communication, relationships, alignment, and execution. So we feel proud of those scores. We feel like, yeah, that's kind of what we expected, to be honest. We feel like that's our sweet spot. We're good at those things. But look at capacity. I mean, it is 10% lower or more than the other ones. That is a huge gap. I mean, it may not look like a big gap because all of our scores are pretty high, but for us to be, so high on everything else, but our capacity is 10% lower than that. So as a leader of this organization, that gives me lots of insights. Our people have too much on their plate. They don't have enough bandwidth. Maybe they're not being trained adequately to have more capacity to do more. There's something about time management potentially and what we're focused on that they don't feel like they have the capacity. There's something there that we can get at. And so seeing this for every team in the organization just brings insight upon insights. It's data for maybe the first time ever for these things. And so just imagine for a second, let's say you have 10, 20 teams in your organization. To be able to answer, what's your lowest performing team? I mean, if I were to ask you that right now, do you know? You could know that with Invincible. You could know what your lowest performing team is. Not so you can, be mad at them, so that you can help them, so you can serve them, so you could support and challenge them to get to the next level, right? Do you know who your highest performing team is? Because there's so much insight in that. If you know what the highest performing team is, you can go to that team and study them. What are they doing differently? What do they know that the other teams don't know? What is it about their leadership style? What is it about their processes? What is it about their relationships, their trust? Like, what is it about that team that makes them different? And when you get together a few high-performing teams and you start seeing correlations or habits or best practices across high-performing teams, then you start to get together a standard operating procedure of how you can affect all the teams in your organization by following the lead of your high-performing teams. And you can see all the teams increase in their scores over time. So again, just to give you the visual of it, this is an actual screenshot from the Invincible product. Now, this isn't the giant team here. This is demo data that I put in there just to show you. But let's say you had two teams. You had a product team and a marketing team. On the product team, you have 7 people. That's what that 7 down there means. And on the marketing team, you have 5 people. You could go in here and you could see, wow, our product team is at 81%. They're doing good. I mean, there's still room for improvement there if the overall score is 81, but they're doing okay. The marketing team needs help. And so you could actually go and click on the marketing team. And then again, just go back to an earlier slide, you would see their version of this spider graph. And maybe it's their alignment is really low. Maybe it's in the dumps. So you could say, all right, we've got to get aligned, marketing team. Maybe it's their relationships. Maybe there's some interpersonal things that are just really affecting everyone's work. There's a couple of personalities. They don't get along. They don't know why they don't get along, but there's been so many things said or done that have hurt the relationship that now it's affecting the team. And when the team's affected, guess what? The work's going to be affected. I mean, if people don't have strong relationships, you better believe it's going to show up in your bottom line. I don't see how it couldn't, right? And so you're going to be able to click on an individual team and see granularly how they're doing. What is the health of that team? And imagine if you had many teams, you wouldn't just see 2 boxes here. You would see a box for every single one of your teams, whether we're talking about 2, whether we're talking about 20 teams, whether we're talking about 200 teams. Just imagine sorting all these boxes by lowest to highest or highest to lowest and seeing all of your teams and the actual data associated with them. So for a lot of people watching this, you might be wondering, well, how do I get started, right? One of the things we wanted to do is we wanted to remove as much friction as possible to how to get started using Invincible with your teams as an organization. And so we've done something really incredible. We've given it so that you can have a free trial. You actually get full access. It's not a limited trial. The days are limited, right? You have a certain number of days you can use it, but it has all the features. You can actually get these scores. You can learn from these scores. You can use this to really drive the performance of your teams. And by the way, I'm just talking about the data piece of Invincible right now. One, there's more data that I'm not talking about. So there's actually other things it can do with data that I think are just as interesting. 2, there's other features altogether that I'm not even talking about. And so this is just one little piece of Invincible, just for the record. But we've made it so that you get full access to do everything I've showed you today. So you can actually get in, kick the tires, play with it. So here's how you get started. If you are watching this live stream right now, then that means you're in the Ascend product. And that means you have a drop down on the top left where you can see all of our products. If you're not in Ascend right now, you might be watching this on a social platform. Maybe you're watching it stream to Facebook or LinkedIn or somewhere like that. Maybe you're watching it on demand after it's been recorded. Then you would need to go to giant.tv and create your free account, and then you'll see this drop down in the top left. So you're either already here, or do you need to create a free account at www.giant.tv, and then you can drop down this menu. And when you do that, you'll see in that menu is the word Invincible. That's how you get to our Invincible product. If you click on Invincible, it's going to have a pop-up, and it's going to ask you if you want to start your free trial. We don't ask you for a credit card to start the trial. We believe in the value of what we're providing. We're not trying to trick you in to some offering. And you can cancel anytime. We don't lock you into a 6-month or a year or 2-year contract. A lot of B2B businesses do. They don't believe in their product enough to just let you cancel whenever you want. We actually believe in our products enough that if you want to cancel Invincible after a month, great. That means we didn't provide the value that we were supposed to. And so when you go to Invincible, it's going to ask you to start your free trial. You don't have to put a credit card on file, and you're going to be able to start using it. And here's the steps I recommend. I would recommend, 1, starting your trial. That's what I just walked you through how to do. Number 2, add your team members. There's going to be things you can do in there without team members, and that's great. You can play around, but I would say add your team members as quick as possible. We have a couple ways you can add them. There's a big button inside there called Add People. It's really hard to miss, but you're going to be able to click that button, and you can upload a CSV file. We give you a template of how to format the CSV file. If you're not familiar with CSV files, just ignore what I'm saying. It doesn't matter. But if you are familiar, you know what I'm talking about. It's simple. It's a name, it's an email address, and if you have a password for them, you can go ahead and type that in, or we'll auto-generate one for them. But you can upload a CSV. This is really good for larger organizations. It allows them to get their people in the system, within a few minutes instead of having to spend hours doing data entry. Otherwise, you can just add people one by one. So you can just type in their name, their email address, and click Add Team Member, and we're going to email them and say, hey, you've been added to Invincible. And so you add your team members, and then along with adding your team members, you put them into teams. So by default, they're just there, right? We don't know what team they belong to, but you can say, okay, let me put these 10 people in the sales team. I'll put these 12 people in the marketing team, and you can easily add people to the teams. So first, start your trial. 2, add your team members and put them in teams. Number 3 is take the Invincible team assessment. Tell your team, hey, we're going to take this assessment. There's going to be a link on there to take the assessment. Have everyone go through these 70 questions. And when it's over, you're going to be able to log in, see your data. Everyone's going to be able to see your data. The people on the team can see the data of that team, and they're going to be able to look at their scores. They'll see what they excel in. They'll see the growth opportunities. And we're even going to be building in more and more features in the future where whatever the low score is, we're going to give you a way to improve it. We're going to say, you know what? If you do this exercise with your team, it can improve that score. And these exercises are going to be based on years of experience of how we actually improve teams, like I said, over the past 7+ years. And so that's the 3 steps that I would recommend as you start Invincible. But just to remind you, data is powerful, right? We live in an era where there's so much potential to really get a hold of truth that we don't need to go on intuition. There's still a place for intuition. I'm not saying that data is everything, but it doesn't have to be all intuition. 50 years ago, it was almost all intuition. Right now, it's not all data, but there's a healthier mix. We can use our intuition, we can use our experiences, but we can have that mix of that with data so that we can lead our teams effectively. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this live stream, The Future of Work. I believe the future of work is having tools like Invincible to be able to get information that specifically about teams so that we can drive team performance and therefore drive organizational performance. All right, thank you all.